welcome to this special episode of The Quest on Rajya Sabha Television. I am Rakhee Bakshee. We are bringing you this episode from New Delhi. We started this program almost in the beginning of this year, and as we are nearing the end of this year, we are almost 50 episodes old. Each week we have been bringing you new personalities who've been sharing with you their stories, their lives, their hopes, their aspirations, and we promise you that in the new year as well, we'll be bringing you new personalities who will be sharing with you their stories. Sir, and you held a number of very significant portfolios during the NDA government. And today, when there is a talk of corruption, I mean, one would say that corruption doesn't have a period. I mean, it has been there and it's going on, which is a major concern once again. What's your take on that?
I think it's undergone a change. When in 1991 we delicensed, we thought this will be the end of corruption. Because you'll have a free market economy, the best will excel. But then areas of corruption changed. For instance, today municipalities, land-related, mining-related, municipal permissions, environmentally related permissions, governmental discretions, allotment of natural resources. Now, instead of licensing, as in the pre-91 regime, it is these areas where corruption really has increased. And my one sentence take is, the moment this government of men, and because of men there are discretions, is replaced by a government of rules, where there is no discretion, I think you could probably reduce a large part of corruption.
So your model of governance would be what, sir?
You see, my conception of an ideal government is, instead of allowing discretions to men, you have strict regulation where the rules will determine as to how permissions are to be granted. For instance, in terms of natural resources, I'd let auctioning determine the market rates. I'm not a great one for keeping discretions with the government, because whichever party is in power, you will always have the kind of people who will abuse discretions.
So you talked about, I mean, let me come back again a little bit to the parliament once again. There seems to be a certain kind of a pattern. There is some kind of revelation, let's say CAG does it, then there's demand, there's shouting, there is talk for either having a JPC or some committee actually focusing on that. There are adjournments, maybe other things. But don't you think, I mean, why should it become a pattern? I mean, why there are rules,
see,
procedures?
If there is an important allegation of corruption, if your institutional mechanisms are in place, that is, the PAC is allowed to do its job, the CBI is an independent agency, there will be a redressal against corruption. If you have those systems in place, you'll never have unrest in the society. Unfortunately, you start subverting these institutions. So 2G, the PAC has still not been able to finalize its report. And on a large number of cases, you use investigative agencies or you misuse them in a particular manner. Now, that doesn't help.
So the Lokpal bill would be the answer.
You see, the Lokpal bill will create an important overseeing mechanism. It will create an ombudsman. It will probably put the fear of redressal in the minds of people and therefore reduce corruption, because the levels of accountability will increase. Will it completely eliminate it? I'm still keeping my fingers crossed.
But the media is also focusing on the rising disruptions, which is a matter of concern also. And do you think that here, BJP as a principal opposition party should in fact try and engage more in dialogue, discussion, debate, which sometimes does not?
Well, I think it's not fair to identify it with one party or the other. For instance, in the session which is through, we are in the mid-session break. There's hardly been a disturbance which has been caused by any of the major parties. It's been regional parties and their issues which have really caused the disturbances. So I think, as I said earlier, you can use disturbance or obstructionism as a weapon, but in the rarest of rare cases. If it's used too frequently, it hurts parliamentary debate. I, for instance, am of the very strong opinion that it should be avoided as far as possible. And my reason for avoiding it is that these days when you disturb, even over a particular issue, your issue may get a one paragraph, two paragraph coverage in the print media, or maybe a one sentence reference in the electronic media. But if you use the same time for highlighting that issue in terms of a debate, and it's an interesting debate, the extent of reach through the media to your own constituents is going to be much higher.
You still have optimism and lots of it.
It pays to debate in Parliament. It doesn't pay to disrupt Parliament.
From this ministry to the later days there, and controversy, do you think controversies follow you or you follow controversies?
Well, certainly, I would not accept either of those questions because I spent almost 3 decades in the international arena without ever having attracted a single controversy of any sort. I was the UN person who was asked to defend the organization, some of the toughest international television programs. I did BBC's Hard Talk twice, Fox News. I was the one person whom Fox News was willing to talk to at the UN with a very anti-UN television channel. I spoke for the organization everywhere. I guided the UN agencies on what to say and what not to say. No one has ever accused me of putting a foot wrong. So I can't suddenly go from 3 decades of that to becoming a controversialist in this country, unless it is also to do with the way in which people have chosen to hear me and interpret what I have to say. There's a great line by Shakespeare talking about humor, where he said that the success of a jest lies not in the tongue of the teller, but the ear of the hearer. And that is true. That was true of the jokes that I cracked, which in a multilingual polity could be translated into sounding nasty. It also, frankly, meant that I didn't fully appreciate the hearers that I had in India, because there were many people in our contemporary media culture where you can deliver a serious speech for 45 minutes, but all they will report is one sentence they can take out of context and create a controversy with, because our media culture is all about breaking news and sensationalism. It's not about intelligent public discourse. All of these things I completely underestimated, and that is one thing I will admit that, not having lived here, I was not prepared for. So I found myself, yes, stumbling from one controversy to another, none of which would have been a controversy in any other democracy in any of the countries that I had lived in. But in India became controversies to a point where, I couldn't even use a rather banal and routine word like interlocutor without 3 days of mass hysteria in the media here about it. And in fact, it's a word that I had used correctly, and now the Home Ministry is using it for the interlocutors in Kashmir. So it's so unfortunate that we are in this.
I know. Then to the Parliament, do you think the platform of Parliament gave you enough space to be what you were in terms of your...
Well, first of all, I didn't really start off being an ordinary MP. I became a minister from the first day, which has a couple of consequences. You can't speak on any subject. You can only speak in your own ministry. And since I was the MOS, I never spoke on my own ministry, almost never, because the minister was there to speak. I think I answered question hour during my entire 11 months as Minister of State. I answered it once because the minister was away. Otherwise, he got the answers. So I was actually not able to do anything much in Parliament during those 11 months. And then as a minister, you don't join any of the committees either. So I was actually basically focused on the ministry, which I enjoyed very much. And I kept very busy. And then, of course, I made the mistake of being accessible to all of you. Since I didn't have an outlet in Parliament, I instead thought the media would be the place where I could speak to the public. So between the media and social media, I got myself into a lot of trouble.
So you've been watching this special episode of The Quest, and we have been bringing you some glimpses of all these personalities and their stories that they have been sharing with us in this entire journey of The Quest. Keep watching. You're watching Rajya Sabha TV. Welcome back to this special episode of The Quest once again. Keep watching, as we'll be showing you much more in this program. As you were saying, that this is actually a glamorous job, and you actually listened to these villagers who wanted you to be here, and actually it was like coming home. So tell us more about that. How was this coming home experience? And also, which was very crucial to what India is going through, the whole development aspect and the whole governance issues that the nation is, beset with.
Right. Well, coming back home, for me, it was a very overwhelming experience, especially because of the expectations that was visible, especially amongst the elders, especially the men who would look up to me, and it was all visible in their eyes. And that really, really deeply touched me. And the scope of work, especially in rural areas, is immense. There is so much to do. And as we all know, more than 70% of the population lives in villages. And what is really unfortunate is the fact that most of these areas, especially remote villages, go neglected and often unnoticed. We have a lot of schemes which are great on paper, but the execution and implementation needs to be improved.
What is a little surprising and also pleasant is that there was no gender perspective to it, and as you're mentioning that these men actually welcomed you is something which sounds so nice actually. Otherwise there's a lot of resistance when women come up and head any organization or anywhere.
That's true. That's right. Yeah.
So how's that like?
That again, for me, I think it works to my advantage because everybody sees me as the daughter of the village. But I must point out the reason that they thought of me was because of the women reservation. It was a reserved seat for women, and that is why they thought about me. Otherwise, I'm not even sure whether they would have, thought of bringing me in. And but like I said, my village, and of course the credit goes to my grandfather to a great degree, because they think it's not the way people think villages are, where there's a lot of gender bias, there's a lot of casteism. Of course, casteism, given the way it is across India, exists. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but it is not deeply ingrained, and as one gets to hear about, especially when we speak of Rajasthan. So I have been lucky in that respect, and what has really worked for me is the fact that, and I had warned the 50 men who came to me in Jaipur to convince me into becoming a sarpanch. I told them that, fine, I'll come in, but you just may be sorry. And the reason I said that was because I told them, I said, I will play fair, and even if people vote for me, it doesn't mean that I will just turn a blind eye. So if somebody does wrong, and I set an example, I said, if my family, for example, somebody within my family has encroached into an area which doesn't belong to us, then that is the first wall that I will get rid of.
How do you think you've changed the mindset of that area, and have you been doing that at all?
Yes. That has been, of course, as we know, it's not an easy task, but at the same time, when people see development, you would be amazed the kind of response we have had. Our first Gram Sabha, and the biggest issue in villages is encroachment, which even the department which is supposed to take care of doesn't get into. And all I said to the people was that don't just think of today, think beyond, and think much ahead, and think for the next generation. Because if today you have two-wheelers, people will graduate to four-wheelers, and Lord forbid, if there's ever a need for a fire brigade or an ambulance, if we don't have the required road width, how is it going to come in? And the next morning, I was called to this area, which is inhabited by the lower strata of the society, and I still get goosebumps just talking about it. People had gone to the extent of breaking down entire walls of their houses. Nobody had told them to do that. But what I realize is when they know people are there to deliver, they will go beyond
So you're basically saying if they trust and if there is faith, then much can happen.
Oh,
and
yes,
the mindset barriers are not there then.
It's not there.
So what all is being done, and what all that you were doing there to kind of develop the area?
Well, in fact, my vision has been, of course, for that, I was hoping to receive support, both from the government as well as the non-government sector. In fact, here I'd like to point out, one I do want to mention is the fact that I'm not affiliated to any party. A lot of people, for some reason, think that I am. Secondly, I have come here as a facilitator, to be a bridging agent between the village and the government as well as the non-government sector. Because I feel it is important to have somebody who can mobilize and take care of the grassroots aspect, because people are apprehensive into getting there, and that is where I feel I fit in, and I feel people should take advantage of it, but I don't see people realizing that, be it the government or the non-government sector. And I'd hope that if I receive the support from the private sector as well as the government, that I could have brought in a holistic development and created a model village so that the work done in this village could then be scaled up and replicated in other villages in the area.
To expand what you're saying this further is that you would ideally like more government or non-government support?
Yes,
ideally?
that's right. Yeah.
So what all would you like to happen?
First and foremost, funding, for example, is a huge challenge. Even if we speak of the government funding, a lot of people think corruption is the issue, but I'd say that is phase two. Phase one is that at the grassroots level, the funds which rightfully belong to panchayats do not even get sanctioned. So corruption would happen if the funding got sanctioned, but that in itself is a tedious thing.
The bigger point, ma'am, exactly that you're making is that how particular this issue or this section, which everybody felt is above, it's a godly status, one would say, should not be touched in that sense. So you are kind of making a beginning in a way. I mean, it's unfortunate that this in turn is the case. How would you look at this uniqueness of touching a section which was not supposed to be touched is being
We've been taught this since childhood, that the judicial function is a divine function. Now, whether it is or not is for the people of this country to judge. But this is what we've been told, that they are very special people. They have been given this opportunity. It's like a trust. Given this opportunity to sit in judgment over ordinary mortals like you and me. And therefore, obviously, they have to be morally above us. That's what gives them the right. So, to answer your question, it's very important for us to recognize that in the last 1 year, since 16 December 2012, when Nirbhaya was raped, which are the three pillars of society which have been completely exposed for what they are?
Truly.
It's the media, through the Tarun Tejpal case. It's the judiciary, through Justice Ganguly's case. And of course, the religious establishment through Acharam's case. I would like Nirbhaya's parents to take note of this. I would like to say that it's very easy for any system to convict, condemn to death people who raped Nirbhaya because they are the underclass of society.
Yes.
What is this 1 year telling us? That what happened to Nirbhaya, what this so-called underclass did, is also being done by the pillars of our society.
So, ma'am, in this case, we are seeing, as you're rightly saying, we are in a democracy and we are looking at this power center which uses, I mean, we are not talking about rape as such, but this whole act of, dominating somebody, subjugating somebody.
You're right. If judges have anything, they have power. And it has been said that they may not have the power of the purse because they don't have the money to distribute. But the power of the judicial system goes beyond the power of the purse because they have the power to sit in judgment over us. They have the power to condemn to death. They have the power to imprisonment. They have all kinds of power. We have in India today a dysfunctional legal system. The legal system just doesn't work.
Do you think, and as we are all trying to also understand, is that at this stage, there is a certain pressure even on him in terms of many others feel that by submitting to this case or, by allowing himself to be questioned more and more and by resigning, in fact, a new precedent would start. And that's what is the fear.
You're right. I think you've hit the nail on the head because I can tell you, and it's been in the public domain as well. Justice Ganguly may not be the only one who's behaved in the manner that he's behaved. And there are other interns who've been approaching me, who've been talking about it and who've been saying that they've had similar experiences. So I actually think, and I've said it before, that I think it's time to have a commission of inquiry into the question how women are treated.
How much do you think we've traveled? I mean, what kind of journey we've made with your kind of interest and work that you've done? How do you feel at this stage?
Well, I think there's a lot that needs to be done in this country. We have gained a lot since our independence in terms of life expectancy, 30 years.
Yeah.
That's quite a lot. But it's very unequally distributed. 57 years of life expectancy in Madhya Pradesh versus 74 years in Kerala. Why can't every state be like Kerala? Our infant mortality and maternal mortality rates are fairly high compared to even our neighboring countries. Our undernutrition rates in children are higher than in sub-Saharan Africa.
When I was reading about you, there's so many Lawrenceville achievements, of course, you have got, but the kind of work you've done is really commendable. And talking about some of the expert groups that you're on, whether it's UN's thematic group on health for all, or you're also on so many expert committees that you're a member on. What is this whole scene like when we talk about India in terms of public health and we look at the global scenario? Where, I mean, as I assume, things are not really so satisfying. We have to really make a long journey still.
People everywhere wonder why India, which has been doing so well in terms of its economy, at least even in recent years, it's doing better than many other countries anyway, why it has fallen behind in the area of health. And part of the reason, of course, is very clear that we spend very little of our public financing on health. But there are multiple other reasons as well. So in terms of the global context, I think India needs to catch up with many other countries. But not so much for their sake, but for our own sake. Because our development is critically hinged to the health and education and skills of our young people. In the next 20 to 30 years, we're going to see a very young India. And if we cannot capitalize on the demographic dividend of that young and potentially productive population, then we're going to be failing. And if we don't invest in health and education, then we will not be able to harness this potential.
But as you're saying this, sir, all these critical points, for example, whether the rising fees, whether the lack of medical colleges, whether the budget not really looking and giving so much priority to health as such, all these issues are still there. And some would say, why not infrastructure status to health as such?
Firstly, I think we need greater prioritization of health by the political decision makers. So far, health has not figured very high up in their list of priorities. But they must recognize that without investing in health, we cannot assure the development of this country. But the critical missing element in our health system has been primary health care. Primary health care has long been neglected. Even NRHM only focuses minimally on maternal and child health. Important as it is, that is not all of primary health care. So, and in urban areas, primary health care doesn't even exist. Unless we strengthen primary health care so that the basic health services are provided to people, health promotion, disease prevention, essential basic medical care with appropriate referral linkages to higher levels of care, we will find a large number of people falling ill when they should not be falling ill, and people being referred to costly hospitals when they don't need to be referred.
So how this problem of resource allocation is being addressed, sir?
So what we need is to strengthen primary care and strengthen the public services, especially the district hospitals and the medical college hospitals. And since the private
sector, more medical colleges, which remains
we do need more medical colleges, but most of the medical colleges are concentrated in the 4 southern states and in Maharashtra, whereas states like UP, Bihar, and the Northeast have very few. And as a result, you don't have many doctors being produced there and staying back there. So we need to correct that imbalance by opening new medical colleges linked to district hospitals, strengthen district hospitals, which itself is good for health services, but use that for teaching as well.
Do you think, sir, the scene is changing? You're talking about more doctors now going to rural areas, or more, in fact, staying in India, not going abroad. Do you think the scene is changing, or?
I don't think it's changing very much. If doctors are going less abroad, that may be because of restrictions elsewhere, rather than the fact that they are volitionally staying back. I think we need to create a system in which doctors also feel productive. See, one point is that we must, of course, encourage our doctors to go to rural areas, but create the infrastructure, create the social amenities where they can work well. If they have to go to a primary healthcare center where there's no electricity, no water supply, no telephone, drugs are available only for 2 months in a year.
No, let me put the question in another manner, is that when it comes again to the medicine or the world of health, the money, of course, starts playing a very important role. So why look at money, but look at service? That's how it should be looked at.
Of course. I mean, I'm not suggesting that doctors should be really looking at the bottom line and trying to earn a lot of money. But the fact is that we do need a system which is well regulated. See, both in terms of cost and quality, the public sector as well as the private sector need to be well regulated. Our regulatory systems are very weak in terms of health. That's why the private sector has grown to the extent it has, unmindful of the people's needs and much more focused on its own bottom line of profit.
As we come to the close of this special edition of The Quest, I would only like to tell you that I hope that you have enjoyed watching these episodes of The Quest as much as I have enjoyed talking to these leading personalities. The idea has been to tell you that how these leading personalities have reached to the places and how they have reached the place that they have reached. Hope you enjoy watching the fresh episodes of The Quest as well in the new year. Thank you so much for watching. A very happy new year to all of you. Goodbye and namaskar.